Welcome to Tony Byrne's View with news you can use. Tony has over 32 years of experience as a chartered financial planner and wealth manager. Tony's passion is to help you retire early and live the life of your dreams with no financial worries. Now to today's episode.
Extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. I have unashamedly taken the title of the famous book as the heading of this podcast. Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds was an early study of crowd psychology by Scottish journalist Charles Mackay, first published in 1841 under the title Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions. Its lessons are every bit as relevant today as they were centuries ago. The following is one of the reviews on Amazon about the book by someone who named themselves Timeless. The pattern of popular delusions is seemingly as active as ever in our times, and Mackay's book gives some great and often grisly evidence of the consequences of mass hysteria in the past. It also shows that there seems to be some sort of propensity in the human psyche to follow such phenomena, and one should be aware of such tendencies. Mackay also showed that there are always ideologies, institutions and people who know all this and try to employ these mass delusion mechanisms to achieve their own goals. If someone would pick this up in a few years and continue it up to our modern times, there would be a lot to write. 20th century, blind rages with millions of dead committed in the name of socialism, nationalism, religion. Today, ideological power struggle by seeding climate, hysteria, identity, politics, and moral superiority, and so on. The underlying problem is as rife as ever. Oh, humanity. I absolutely do love the old English language in which it was written and the more humorous episodes in it. But that's subjective, of course. In particular, the stories of the Mississippi Scheme, the South Sea Bubble and Tulipomania struck a chord with me personally when I read the book. These stories were very reminiscent of the dotcom boom of the late 90s, which inevitably burst in March 2000. That was the most recent example of a popular delusion and the madness of crowds that I have personally known during my lifetime. Of course, 20 years ago, the dotcom bubble officially burst, and that ended a period of rampant hype and investment into technology stocks with a bang and many whimpers. In the late 1990s, as the internet or the World Wide Web as it was popularly known in those days, there were many companies, many startups that raised huge amounts of money, billions of pounds overnight. And basically all you had to do was form a company in the US and put .com after your name, and that would ensure you riches galore. But of course, the party wasn't going to last. Most of these companies never made $1 in profit. The Nasdaq, the US index of technology stocks, reached an all-time high of 5,132 in March 2000, 10th of March 2000. But by October 2002, it lost 75% of its value. So there were companies that formed at the time that seemed to be potential cash cows like Pets.com, Cosmo or eToys. They all imploded. Of course, most of us can't even remember those companies. But others emerged from that time. For example, Amazon and eBay, and they managed to really grow since then. Now in 2020, the tech space is burgeoning but crowded. It's a bit different this time because we do use the internet a lot more, and there are companies that are making lots of profit in the technology space and look set to continue. You think of the so-called FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Spotify, all these companies are continuing to grow and they are making a lot of profit. So it's a bit different this time around, but there's still many companies that seem to be very highly overvalued at the moment. Of course, we have had these popular delusions and madness of crowd incidents even in recent years. For example, Bitcoin in 2017 went through a fantastic meteoric rise in value from $1,000 per Bitcoin at the start of 2017 to nearly $20,000 by the end of the year. The trouble was the next year it all came crashing down and investors would have lost 80% the following year in 2018. So it's still around, this mania, and it looks like it's always going to continue because it just seems to be a human failing. Now, I wanted to just give you some examples of a few companies that really do seem to be massively overvalued. Now, Uber's one of those companies. It may have transformed transportation across the globe, but the company's never made any money. And the coronavirus is a huge threat to its business model. The same with Airbnb. They've had to lay off huge numbers of people, 1,900 people, because of course they're working in the accommodation industry. It's not hotels, it's usually private apartments, but nonetheless it's been hit massively by coronavirus. So it's again a huge threat to its business model. WeWorks is another company that makes a lot of promises. They're trying to make themselves out to be a technology company, but they're not. This is serviced offices. Again, they don't make any money. It looks like they're just going to fail very badly. And of course, the most hyped example of all is Tesla. Now, I'm a great fan of Tesla. I even own a Tesla car. It's an incredible car, there's no doubt about it. But as a company, it's one of the worst run companies I've ever come across. They've been formed since 2003. They still have never yet made $1 profit on selling cars. This is 17 years they've been running. They make a fraction of the cars of other car companies, such as Toyota, for example. Their market capitalization is greater than the next 5 car manufacturers in the world, who all make far more cars than Tesla, and they are also profitable. Now, Tesla's on ludicrous P ratio of more than 1,000. And when I talk about P ratio, I'm not going to bore you with explaining how it all works, but let me tell you this. A high P ratio is a number of, say, more than 15. So if you get to 20 or to 30, that's pretty high. But when Tesla is currently standing at 1,100, that gives you some idea of a crazy overvaluation. This one has to be set to end in tears. Going back a good few weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, the US government decided to lend Kodak $765 billion to help them produce components deemed critical in the battle against COVID-19. And this caused the share price in one day to rise 1,600%. Now, Kodak, as far as I'm concerned, is not a pharmaceuticals company. They were actually bankrupted a few years ago, but in the US you can still limp along after bankruptcy. It's Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they call it in America. The company's still limping along, Lord knows how, because its traditional business has been completely shot to pieces, because it's in the photography and film industry business, and of course it's all been taken over by digital cameras and smartphones. That company, it's inconceivable that company can succeed, because what have they got? They've got one huge debt and an unproven business model. So it just seems farcical that the share price should rise so much. It's all based on delusion, mania again. And then there's this company called Moderna, which is one of a number of pharmaceuticals companies working to create a coronavirus vaccine. Its share price has gone through the roof, which doesn't make much sense, because it's one of many pharmaceutical companies working on creating this vaccine. But this is their only product, and they've not even created it yet. Whereas Pfizer, the world's largest drugs company, is also working on a coronavirus vaccine, but it's already very profitable. It's already got many other successful drugs, but its share price hasn't boomed, unlike Moderna. Again, this doesn't make much sense at all. A company we've used ourselves quite a lot during lockdown is Zoom, which specialises in video conferencing. Now, I can't understand this one either, because we've never paid a penny to Zoom to use their video conferencing service. Most customers don't pay anything. You can have a video conference call for 40 minutes for free. We just end our meetings after 40 minutes, so we never paid them a bean. I can't see how they can ever be very profitable. There are many, many rivals that offer a similar and better service in my experience, and it's free of charge. So how can Zoom have a price that's literally zoomed up so much it has to crash? So all of these 7 examples of overvalued and overhyped companies lead me to believe that there's a huge bubble in the US stock market which is going to burst. It is inevitable. It's only a question of when, not if. On every metric I've looked at, the US stock market is at an historical high. It's never been so overvalued ever. So it can only go one way. The trouble is none of us know when. This could drag on for weeks, months, years even. But the writing's on the wall. It has to fall substantially at some stage. Human beings do not change. We're just as gullible and foolish as we were back in Charles Mackay's days and in the hundreds of years of examples he gave prior to the date of writing his book in 1841. We're all flawed creatures who get carried away with mass hysteria. Today is the Robin Hood trading platform in the US, which is enticing thousands of mainly young, naive Americans to buy shares, such as the overhyped ones mentioned earlier. And this is creating the latest bubble. So what should you do about it? You need to be cautious at times like this. Remember, Warren Buffett once famously said that it is wise for investors to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. The best approach at times like this is to diversify your investments by not having all of your eggs in one basket. If you have an advisor, adopt a cautious attitude to investment risk. Once the US stock market experiences another large fall, that will be the time to increase your attitude to investment risk and invest more into shares. You know it makes sense.
Welcome to Tony Byrne's View with news you can use. Tony has over 32 years of experience as a chartered financial planner and wealth manager. Tony's passion is to help you retire early and live the life of your dreams with no financial worries. Now to today's episode.